Welcome to Episode 2, BNSF Stronghold Gateway Subdivision. In this segment, we will cover current operational practices by BNSF on the Gateway Sub and explore their potential application to the 1:29 scale model replica of Stronghold. On December 31st, 1996, the Burlington Northern Railroad and the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad formally merged into the Burlington Northern and Santa Fe Railway. Prior to the merger, Burlington Northern freight trains would hand off their southbound manifest to the Union Pacific at Beaver, California. Likewise, northbound freight from the UP would also change hands at Beaver. This practice had been in place for many years due to an arrangement originally made between former line stewards, the Great Northern and the Western Pacific. However, in 1997, that arrangement would be dissolved. The UP-SP merger produced a new operational agreement where UP was forced to sell the Beaver-Keddie trackage to BNSF and provide new trackage rights on the ex-Western Pacific main line from Keddie to Stockton. This new configuration worked in considerable favor to the BNSF, and the railroad company immediately set out to rebuild and upgrade the entire length of the line. Current BNSF practice dictates that a train's designation depends on cargo and an originating and terminating point. Most of the traffic on the Gateway Sub are classified as general merchandise freights with an initial identifier as H. An H designation means the train is considered a high priority manifest, while an M designation means a normal priority manifest. Beyond the cargo identifier, the rest of the designation identifies an origination termination as well as a direction. A number following the cargo and origination termination identifier indicates the train's priority, while any additional numbers indicate a train's origin by calendar date. Number indicators are not always necessary and are typically assigned to provide further differentiation between the trains with similar cargo, originations, and destinations. The remaining traffic on the Gateway Sub is on an as-needed basis, and although frequent, they are without regular or consistent scheduling. Examples of these trains are oil worms or empty unit oil trains headed back to North Dakota. An X designation means the train is unit empties, where a U would indicate loads. Other as-needed movements can be repositioned empty unit well car trains, officer specials, local service, and unit grain trains. An interesting note, often the unit grain trains have full sets of Canadian National or Canadian Pacific Power due to origination points in Canada. The Gateway Sub has no intercontinental, regional, or intercity passenger service. Amtrak's Coast Starlight serves Klamath Falls, Oregon on the Union Pacific Cascade Line and represents the only passenger service by rail in the area. Passenger service would never see these rails with the exception of a line closure reroute. As of late 2011, the Gateway Sub sees one local that runs out of Klamath Falls, Oregon to Crescent Mills, California. The local services shippers up and down the line and manages an unusually longer run than most locals. There are 2 trains a week, south to Crescent Mills on Monday and back north to Klamath Falls on Tuesday, and once again south on Thursday and back north on Friday. It is this local that will be the operational focus for the BNSF Stronghold model replica. In theory, the 1:29 scale model replica of Stronghold will function much like the prototype. The overall ops scheme will be managed under track warrant control and abide by the rules and regulations provided in the most recent edition of the BNSF Gateway sub-timetable. The layout will feature a modern lineup of through freight trains, but the focus will be centered around the activity of the local. The current BNSF timetable indicates the UP Railroad Modoc sub-crossing and automatic interlocking at milepost 31.1 and the station point Stronghold at milepost 31.6, a half mile to the south. According to the timetable, the siding at Stronghold is 2,250 feet in length. Each op session will feature the crew of the local and their switching responsibilities at Stronghold. In order to successfully navigate an op session, the crew will need to refer to their train orders issued by the dispatcher, complete any work required at this station, manage any consist or territorial challenges, and contend with the automatic interlocking at the diamond north of Stronghold. In the interest of adding yet another layer of realism to the op session, this layout will feature a list of alternate reality augmentations determined by the crew of the local at the beginning of each operating session. This added augmentation will be known as circumchance and will determine the overall experience for the op session. Consider this. In the modeling world, train crews will typically experience the same set of variables during a shift or a session, with minimal deviation. For example, some model railroads can get relatively complex with specific jobs or rolling stock tracking and distribution systems. Some require a novel of reading material before an op session, and others may feature a considerable amount of traffic, making the dispatcher's job a nightmare. But the one constant is that each job on the layout typically provides the same experience each session. Now consider this. In the real world, train crews may typically see the same job, but there are far more variables to experience. For example, a crew may report on duty as planned, assume their duties on a designated train, and see the same rail with the same geographical makeup, generally for the same duration of time. Do you know what changes their experience? Random events and circumstances that are out of their control. Maybe that day the crew will encounter severe weather that impedes on timely switching. Or maybe there is a malfunctioning crossgate or block signal that requires maintenance. Another variable may be that the crew must account for a hazmat load requiring speed restrictions, or perhaps maintenance of way is out that day repairing the track. All of these real-world variables can be applied to the modeling world in order to provide a slightly different experience for each job in each op session. The more variables that are provided or introduced, the more diversified the experience. The question now becomes how to organize, then determine these random events and variables in order to augment an op session. The premise is simply a basic understanding of the breadth of randomness. The objective would be to create a list of random possibilities involving railroad-related elements, followed by organizing these random events and elements into two separate categories: consist variables and territory variables. This division is necessary in order to better define, differentiate, and assign the variables. For example, a consist variable can be an event or element that may only physically pertain to the train, its crew, equipment, or its physical makeup, meaning that a random weather event would not apply, whereas a random coupler knuckle break or separation causing the train to go into emergency braking would apply. Likewise, territory variables may only pertain to events and elements that exclude the train, its crew, equipment, or physical makeup. For example, a severe weather event such as flooding at a specific milepost would apply, where a faulty locomotive bell or horn would need to be categorized as a consist variable. The setting is late spring in the Klamath Valley, and the crew for the local is ready to receive their orders from the dispatcher and get underway. However, before their day can begin, the operating crew must establish a few determining factors that may or may not have an impact on the railroad that day. This is called circumchance and is an operational augmentation the crew of the local can choose to implement or not. If chosen, the crew must follow the preparatory items prior to the beginning of the op session. These items are determining the consist scenario and the territory scenario. Once the scenarios have been established, there are no changes or exceptions. The scenarios apply to the entire railroad for the duration of that session, and the local crew must adhere to these parameters until the successful completion of the crew's duties. The consist scenario card contains a list indicating a variety of consist-related scenarios the operating crew will need to consider when completing their objectives. Possible scenarios can vary and may include car-related speed restrictions, hazardous or special materials handling, equipment malfunctions, or even a rare oversized car or load. In order to establish which scenario the new operating crew will have to abide by will depend on the engineer's date of birth, specifically the day, aligning with a corresponding scenario number. In this example, the engineer's birthday is the 9th of July. This means the local crew would have to refer to the 9th scenario on the list, which is the golden loaf scenario. The dice roll correlates to the number on the event list on the territory event variable card. The number on the list identifies a specific event not related to the train itself, or may determine the overall condition of the territory for that workday. These conditions may include unusual track conditions, severe weather, geographical events, traffic reroutes, maintenance of way work, or even livestock on the right-of-way. The conductor or fireman will be responsible for the 20-sided die roll to determine which event variable the crew will be fated with. In this example, the conductor is rolled a 14. This indicates that the crew of the local will be facing a broken rail repair that will not allow the crew to utilize the siding once they reach Stronghold. Here in the 20 by 10 garden shed is where all the traffic on the layout will originate and terminate. The shed is a host to a multi-level helix loop, staging, and storage. The top level staging represents BNSF Station Point Mammoth and ultimately on to Beaver, California, where the bottom level staging represents Klamath Falls. Our local cruise run today will begin in Klamath Falls. It is 10:20 a.m. in Klamath Falls, and the local has received its orders from the dispatcher and has been given the clearance to leave the yard. According to the circumchance results, the crew has lucked out today with no territory events. However, they do have a bad order car which imposes a maximum speed restriction for the day. The train is headed by 2 SD40s with 8 loads and 3 empties. When the local reaches Stronghold in roughly an hour, they will have to take the siding to allow the HPAS BAR3 to pass per their train orders. Once they are in the clear, the crew will have 3 empty setouts and 1 loaded pickup to deal with before moving on. The southbound local heads out on the main at restricted speed headed for Stronghold. The train makes its way along the bottom level, which doubles as a stair step. The level stands at 8 inches in height and 20 inches out from the retaining wall, including the decorative stone blocks. The actual railroad bed and total width of the right-of-way is only 12 inches. When a train is not occupying this level, an operator may use this as a step to reach equipment on the upper level, which is at 48 inches in height. The local enters the bottom of the helix. The helix base will be partially covered by a decorative rock wall that reaches a maximum height of 30 inches. The helix construction will be made of PVC piping for adjustable supports and a wood corkscrew platform. Access to the inside of the helix will be from a flagstone bench at the southern end of the helix. The local exits the top of the helix and has received a clear signal from the automatic interlocking at milepost 31.1. The local first crosses Highway 139 and then the diamond and proceeds to Stronghold. At Stronghold, the local enters the siding and prepares to get in the clear for the oncoming traffic. After the HPASBAR3 has passed, the local is now clear to make its switching moves. The local makes its first cut, then pulls forward to clear the turnout for base and co-op. A reverse move is made that allows the local to enter the base and co-op track and couple to the loaded grain car. After picking up the loaded grain car from basin, the local pulls back out onto the siding to clear the turnout. The local reverses and makes a joint connection to the rest of the train on the siding, adding the new grain load to the consist. After dropping the grain load, the local then pulls forward once again, clearing the base and co-op turnout. The local makes a shove back through the base and co-op track, passing the rest of its train in the siding. The local backs into the number 2 track of Grow King to drop 2 empty 2-bay hopper cars. Once the cars have been correctly spotted, the local then pulls forward back down the base and co-op track while the conductor reverses the turnout on track 2 for Grow King. The local runs around its train and clears the south end turnout of base and co-op. The conductor sets the turnout to neutral, giving access to the siding. In this reverse move, the local will perform a bump and shove where the train will slow just enough to make a connection with the rest of the train in the siding and then continue shoving the entire consist backwards. Here, the conductor must walk almost the entire distance of the siding to reach the north turnout in order to gain access to Grow King Track 1. The local will continue shoving the consist backwards, and once there is access to track 1 at Grow King, the local will spot its last empty. The local will spot the empty 50-foot boxcar at Grow King track 1. The train will then pull forward, clear their turnout where the conductor will reverse the switch, allowing access to the main from the siding. The conductor will also confirm that the turnout on the main track is in the neutral position before returning to the head end of the train. The train pulls forward into the siding and the engineer will make sure the train is in the clear on both ends, stop and await the brake test. At this point, the conductor will perform a visual inspection of each car and attach any unconnected brake hoses. Once the conductor has walked the train, connected the brake hoses, and confirmed a visual inspection, the conductor will walk to the south siding turnout and line the local out to the main track. After a quick review of the train orders and confirmation of track authority, the local can proceed south out of the siding. Once on the main track, the conductor's final job will be to realign the turnout to neutral position, providing main track access at the south end of Stronghold. Then return to the head end to join the engineer and continue on.